Today's case leaves us with two main questions. Was it an accident, or was it something far more sinister? The death of 8-year-old Jaylin Schwarz initially appeared to be a tragic accident. A little girl who just kept playing and playing, not knowing her limits. But what her own sister had to say about the situation was shocking. This seemingly open and shut case quickly turned into a complex story with many sides, all which lead to the tragic death of a sweet, innocent little girl. With that being said, let's just jump into the details. Jaylin Ann Schwarz was born on November 10th, 2011 in Rockwall, Texas, to her parents David Rutherford and Alicia Anderton. Jaylin was known to be full of life, a happy little girl who loved horseback riding, ice skating, and all things outdoors. She had interests in history and science, and she loved animals. She was the type of little girl who just loved everyone around her, and they always loved her right back. But when Jaylin was just 5 years old, back in April of 2017, Jaylin's biological mother gave up her parental rights over Jaylin and her little sister Jade after being reported to CPS for methamphetamine use. She didn't put up much of a fight when it came to giving up her parental rights because she thought that this is what was best for the girls because she knew that she couldn't raise them the way they deserved, at least not at that time. So the decision was made to give legal guardianship of Jaylin and Jade to her stepsister, Ashley Schwarz, and her husband, Daniel Schwarz. In the eyes of Alicia and the court system, this seemed to be the best solution at the time. This would avoid the girls having to go through the system. They would be cared for by people they already knew, people who already loved them. Plus, the arrangement included visitation rights so that Alicia could keep contact with her daughters. By all accounts, Jade and Jaylin would be living in a happy, healthy home with guardians who would take good care of them, all while Alicia worked to better herself, to hopefully become the mother she wanted to be someday. But unfortunately, the girls weren't sent to a happy, loving home. It was anything but. Now, at first, Ashley and David went along with the agreement as stated. Alicia got to see her daughters and have regular contact with them, but pretty quickly, that stopped. Ashley and David started refusing to allow Ashley to see the girls until eventually they cut her off completely. For the 3 years that followed, Alicia tried to get Ashley and David to let her see them, but nothing ever came of it. So by April of 2020, Alicia filed with the courts saying that she was being denied visitation by her legal guardians, even though she still had visitation rights. The process was starting, but as we know, by the start of 2020, everything came to a crashing halt and lockdowns were in full effect. This slowed everything down, and any cases within the court system were just sitting. Any hope that Alicia had of seeing her daughter would soon all be lost because by that point, it was already too late. The morning of August 29th, 2020 started as any normal day according to Ashley. It was a hot summer day in Odessa, Texas. The girls spent the morning playing while Ashley and Daniel worked on a remodeling project they had going on inside the home. Jaylin was known to love being outside even on the hottest or coldest of days, while her sister Jade preferred playing inside. So while Jade was in and out of the house that morning, Jaylin stayed outside the entire time, playing with the dogs and jumping around on the trampoline. By around 1 p.m. that afternoon, when Daniel went outside to check on Jaylin, he saw that she was happily playing with the dogs. But then, just a few minutes later, when he went outside to take out the trash, he was horrified to see that Jaylin was lying on the ground, unresponsive. Immediately, he grabbed her and rushed inside, telling Ashley that something was wrong. As they carried her, Ashley heard as she started wheezing and having a lot of trouble breathing. They brought her straight to the bathroom, stripped off her clothes, then ran some cold water over her to try and cool her down. In the process of doing that, though, Jaylin stopped breathing, and Daniel realized that she didn't have a pulse. That is when he started CPR while Ashley ran to grab a phone and dial 911. She told the operator that her daughter Jaylin had been playing outside when she suddenly went unresponsive and collapsed. She must have overheated in the sun. By 1:50 p.m., the first responders arrived and took over CPR on Jaylin. Immediately upon seeing her and touching her, they felt that her body was very, very hot and stiff. Her skin had turned a purple color and she had severe sunburns all over her body. She also had red marks on her knees, back, and shoulder blades. In that moment, they realized that she was already dead and had been long enough that rigor mortis and lividity had kicked in. There was nothing they could do to save little 8-year-old Jaylin's life. At that time, of course, officers questioned Ashley and David about what happened. Ashley went on to explain that at around 9 a.m. that morning, she made the girls pigs in a blanket for breakfast before they went outside to play by 9:30. She wasn't sure if the girls brought water outside with them, but she assumed that they had because there were some water bottles missing from the fridge, so she figured that they would be okay playing outside in the hot sun for a bit. Ashley explained that she left a window cracked open so that she could hear and see the girls. They would often come up to the window to ask to be let in or have their water bottles filled. Ashley said that she didn't lock the doors or prevent the girls from coming inside when they wanted, but because they were working on this home renovation project, she would ask for them to wait outside for a minute while she cleaned up the nails and debris. Basically, they'd tell her that they want to come in, she'd clean up the area real quick to make sure it was safe for them to walk around, then they could come in. That morning, she said that they came inside and filled up their waters at least one time. By around 12:15 p.m., Ashley said that she made the girls some peanut butter sandwiches. She remembers that Jade drank her juice and Jaylin used the restroom, but Jaylin wouldn't eat her lunch because she wasn't hungry. She was too hot. After using the restroom, Jaylin insisted that she wanted to go back outside and play despite just saying that she was too hot. Of course, Ashley and her argued about this for a bit, but Ashley gave in and let Jaylin go back outside to play while Jade stayed inside. After this, Ashley went and checked on her one time, seeing that Jaylin was happily jumping on the trampoline and rolling around with the dogs. Then, as I stated, Daniel also checked on her once and still saw her playing with the dogs. But just a few minutes after this second time checking her, she suddenly collapsed. At this point, officers felt that Jaylin probably died of heat exhaustion. She was playing outside too hard, too long, and didn't know her own limits. And because Ashley and David didn't see anything wrong with Jaylin that morning, they didn't realize that she was in danger. This all just seemed to be a heartbreaking accident. But when investigators interviewed Jaylin's sister about what happened, they were shocked to learn that this may not have been a tragic accident. There was much, much more to this disturbing story. Then 7-year-old Jade explained that the home in which they lived with Ashley and Daniel wasn't always a happy one. She recalls that, yes, there were some happy times. They got to go on family vacations to places like Florida. They spent time with family during the holidays. But their day-to-day lives were confusing and scary. The rules they were expected to follow were unclear. They were punished for one thing one day, but then not the next. For example, they weren't sure if they were allowed to go in the fridge because sometimes if they grabbed water, they were punished, but other times it was okay. If they did break the rules or get in trouble, they were often spanked or forced to do exercises while food and water were withheld, all as punishment. Sometimes they had to write out sentences, and once Jaylin had her head shaved. They were made to pick up dog poop in the yard, which is totally fine under most circumstances, but sometimes they were forced to do it without gloves, so they had to touch the dog poop. She would often have to carry weights up and down the hallways repeatedly, and they were forced to jump on the trampoline for extended periods of time. If they ever stopped jumping during their punishments, they were told that they would be out there for longer and longer with less and less water the more breaks they took. The morning of Jaylin's death didn't start out as a fun day playing in the sun as Ashley initially tried to make it seem. Jade explained that she thinks they had breakfast that day but wasn't sure if Jaylin got to eat or not. She did say that oftentimes breakfast was the only meal they got. They'd usually go the rest of the day without any food because if they were in trouble, they weren't allowed to eat. She also said that she doesn't remember what she or Jaylin did to get in trouble that day, but both of them were told to go jump on the trampoline because they were in trouble. They were each given 2 cups of water that morning, but after that, they weren't given any more. Once they were outside and jumping on the trampoline, Ashley locked the door so they couldn't come back inside. They were left outside for hours, and as the morning turned to afternoon, no one checked on them a single time. By that afternoon, temperatures had reached a high of 110 degrees Fahrenheit, so of course, the girls were hot and thirsty being stuck outside. Because they couldn't go back inside, they couldn't refill their water bottles, so they tried using the hose, but they weren't strong enough to turn the knob. They also considered drinking from the dogs' water bowls, but they were afraid of getting caught by their parents. I also want to note that the girls were not allowed to wear shoes when they went outside, so they were jumping on that black trampoline in 110-degree weather with no protection to their feet. Testing by investigators later showed that the trampoline had reached a temperature of about 110 degrees, while the ground reached about 150 degrees during the time they were outside without shoes or socks on. It was also said that the marks that first responders found on their backs, shoulder blades, and knees were from rolling around on the very hot ground. So those were burns from either rolling around on the ground or being on the trampoline. Eventually, that afternoon, Jade said that she was let back inside, but Jaylin wasn't, though she can't remember why. She said that the last time she saw Jaylin, she was lying in the middle of the trampoline. Jade told her sister, the sooner she jumps, the sooner she can come inside, and the sooner she can finally get some water. But Jaylin didn't respond to her sister and didn't get up to start jumping again. The next thing she knew, she saw Daniel carrying Jaylin inside, telling Ashley to call 911. Based on this horrifying story, investigators went to the home to check a few things out. First, they confirmed that there were no water bottles or any indication that there had been any water available to the girls in the backyard, meaning it doesn't appear that they brought any water outside with them. So if they were drinking out of different water bottles, they might have left them outside, or they might have been in a trash can outside, or there would have been some sort of indication that there was water outside with them. The fridge did have water in it, but again, if the doors were locked and they were forced to stay outside, then it doesn't matter whether there was water in the fridge or not. Then, after the discovery of Jaylin's body, she was sent to the medical examiner for an autopsy. There, the medical examiner found that Jaylin had bruises on her buttocks that happened prior to death. She had also suffered such severe sunburns that when her parents removed her clothing when they first brought her to that bathtub, her skin sloughed off. Her body had also already started the process of decomposition by that point. She had very elevated levels of electrolytes in her system and sunken eyes, which indicated that she was extremely dehydrated at the time of her death, and it appears that she hadn't eaten the entire day. She had very elevated levels of electrolytes in her system and sunken eyes, which indicated that she was extremely dehydrated at the time of her death, and it appears that she hadn't eaten that entire day. The medical examiner determined that Jaylin died as a result of dehydration and hyperthermia and ruled her cause of death a homicide. The ME went on to say that dehydration typically takes multiple days to kill someone, but of course, the effects can be hastened based on factors such as age, hot weather, and physical exertion. Someone suffering from dehydration and heat stroke will start showing symptoms such as dizziness, weakness, racing heartbeat, and syncope. These symptoms would likely start quite a bit before the person actually dies from dehydration. So if Ashley and Daniel checked on her when they said they did, she likely would have been experiencing and showing symptoms already. So they're either lying about when they checked on her, or they saw her with these symptoms and did nothing about it. Then, as I stated earlier, when first responders first arrived, Jaylin's body was already stiff, showing signs of rigor mortis and lividity. This happens within 1 to 3 hours of being deceased. According to Ashley and Daniel, they want you to believe that she was perfectly fine 1 minute, then suddenly collapsed the next. As soon as she collapsed, she was then taken to the shower and rinsed, but she stopped breathing at that time. They called 911 right away, who showed up within minutes. Yet somehow, she had already started rigor mortis. That simply does not make sense. So again, Ashley is either lying about calling 911 right away, or she is lying about when she last saw Jaylin alive.
She confirmed again today her initial ruling as the cause of death was from dehydration and hypothermic conditions. She explained that a hot environment and exertion can accelerate the timeline for that type of death. Now, part of her ruling in the autopsy was that it was a homicide with the circumstances she was aware of. She said it's a medical term as an act or omission by a person that led to someone's death. However, she did say that if there was access to water and not a punishment involved, that could make things different.
Based on everything we've heard up to this point, it appears that these girls suffered extensive, prolonged abuse at the hands of the very people who went out of their way to take them in. They knew that spending that much time outside in the hot sun, exerting themselves physically while being denied food and water would lead to Jaylin's death, yet they did it anyways. Because of this, both 37-year-old Ashley and 47-year-old Daniel Schwarz were arrested and charged with capital murder and 2 counts each of injury to a child, 1 count relating to Jaylin and the other to Jade. Both pleaded not guilty and were held on a $500,000 bond, and they were set to be tried separately. 3 years passed before the first trial started, once again, partially due to the fact that this happened in 2020, and any case that happened during that time took a very long time to proceed in court. But finally, by April of 2023, Ashley's trial for Jaylin's murder began. The prosecution argued everything I've told you up to this point, that both girls endured extensive abuse in the form of forced exercise, spankings, and being denied food and water, and being humiliated like when they shaved Jaylin's head. They said that on the morning of Jaylin's death, they weren't outside jumping on the trampoline for fun. It was to torture them. It was a hot, sunny day, reaching temperatures past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet even after long, arduous hours of being forced to jump, she was continuously denied food or water. Any reasonable adult knows that this can lead to dehydration and heat stroke, but it continued anyways, leading to Jaylin's slow, painful death. And even after her death, authorities were not called right away. Based on the state of her body, it was impossible for her to reach rigor mortis in that short of a time frame. So it was either neglect, i.e. they didn't check on them at all, which is most likely what happened based on what Jade said, or it was willful negligence, seeing her passed out and exhausted, not doing anything, which led to the delay in getting her medical care. I think that's also partially what it was. The prosecution brought forward the first responders who tried saving her life but couldn't. They talked about the burns on her body, how there were areas of her body where the skin fell off when her clothes were removed, how stiff her body was when they first arrived. The pathologist testified to her cause of death, saying that she was not given water before her death. Then, Jaylin's sister Jade, who is now 10 at the trial, bravely took the stand to testify about their time with them, as well as the day that Jaylin died. They were not playing that day. They didn't choose to be in the hot sun, exhausting their bodies. It was forced. As someone who survived many summers past 100 degrees, I will tell you that even a few minutes of physical exertion in that weather is exhausting. Even a 10-minute walk around the block will leave you feeling parched, desperate for water. Then don't even get me started on how hot the ground can get. No one would choose to go barefoot on such a hot ground. And even if a child did choose that for some reason, it's up to the parent to make them wear shoes or socks to avoid burns, because when the ground is that hot, you're gonna get burnt. But with that being said, there is no way that Jaylin or Jade chose to be out in that hot sun exercising for hours on end without begging for water. There's no way that they could have just been like distracted little girls who pushed themselves too far in that weather. Even the most energetic, active kids will stop when they're that level of dehydrated and ask for water and take a break before going back out. Yes, kids overplay in the sun all the time. I'm not even really blaming the sunburns on the parents as much, even though, yes, they should have kept track of her skin. They should have made sure she wore sunscreen and covered up, but it happens. Kids get burnt sometimes. But this level of overplaying does not happen. Kids will want water. Kids will want a snack when they've been playing that long. So to say that they were just outside playing and were refusing to drink water and didn't want any food, that's just not true. If you've ever met a kid, you'd know that's not true. The prosecution argued that this was a deliberate act done to harm Jaylin, which was taken way too far. They murdered that little girl for reasons we may never even know, because to this day, we still don't know why they were in trouble. On the other hand, the defense painted Ashley as a doting, loving mother who graciously took in these two children who needed a home. She took these girls on family vacations, fed them 3 meals a day, and treated them well. Yes, there were times in which she spanked them, but that was as far as the punishments went. She would never force them to jump on the trampoline. It was always for fun. She would never withhold food or water. They always had access to it in the house. She didn't lock the doors when they were outside. Again, she would tell them to wait because they were doing home renovations. She didn't want them stepping on nails or debris. But once that was cleaned up, they were always allowed inside. She said that she was absolutely torn apart from Jaylin's death. She maintained that Jaylin and Jade chose to be outside that day and they were playing. She maintained that she checked on them every few minutes and fed them breakfast and lunch. She said it was within just a few minutes when she noticed that Jaylin had collapsed, which shocked her and upset her to no end. First responders did agree that she was visibly upset and distraught when they arrived. She exclaimed multiple times she was okay a few minutes ago. She said that the marks on her body were from rolling around on the ground and the trampoline with the dogs, and that she chose to be barefoot and I guess get burns all over her body. She maintained that this was not a purposeful murder, but a tragic accident that she wishes never would have happened. After hearing evidence from both sides, the prosecution and defense made their closing arguments, and the jury was off for deliberation. And when they came back, they found that Ashley Schwarz is in fact guilty on all charges: capital murder and both counts of injury to a child. For these charges, she was given 3 life sentences.
On the last day of the week-long Ashley Schwarz trial, the jury finalized her sentencing. The jury found Schwarz guilty on Friday for capital murder, injury to a child, and injury to a child by omission following several days of evidence and testimony. Capital murder carries an automatic life sentence without parole. Today, the jury handed down life sentences for the other 2 charges, along with a $5,000 fine for each. Before the jury went into deliberation for about an hour and 45 minutes, they heard final closing arguments from both attorneys. The defense said they were looking to find hope in a hopeless situation. They also mentioned not wanting to minimize what happened to Jaylin. They ultimately disagreed with the verdicts. The state countered by telling the jury that they got the verdicts 100% right. The state said while the defense wanted to give hope to Schwarz, they argued she is alive to have hope, whereas Jaylin is not. Judge John Schroed told Schwarz before closing the trial that she would have a long time to think about what she did.
After Ashley's trial, it was time for Daniel to go to trial. But after hearing news of how Ashley's trial went, he decided that he needed to save his own ass because these Texas juries are not taking child abuse lightly. It was also claimed that he took a more passive role in Jaylin's death, that he didn't enforce the rules of them exercising or not being allowed to eat or drink. He just went along with it and didn't check on the girls either way. I don't think he checked on either of them on the day that Jaylin died. I do believe that he saw her when he was taking out the trash, and because no one had checked on her in so long, she had probably already been dead for around 30 to 40 minutes, up to an hour. I think he grabbed her and did bring her inside in a panic. I think they both came to the realization that things went too far and that she was dead. I don't think she was wheezing or anything like that. I think that was just a detail they came up with to make it seem like they checked on her more frequently than they did. I do think they tried to bring her back, as many parents do when they realize their abuse went too far. But either way, due to Daniel's smaller, more passive role in Jaylin's death, he worked with the prosecution to accept a plea deal. He ended up pleading guilty to lesser charges of manslaughter. As a result, he was given a sentence of 18 years behind bars, which is not very much compared to what his wife is facing. Obviously, I wish he got just as much time as Ashley, because to me, sitting back and watching abuse, allowing it to happen and doing nothing about it is just as bad as being the perpetrator of abuse. So yes, I do think he should have gotten just as much time as Ashley. But with that being said, at the same time, I am glad that he pleaded guilty to something, because at least now Jade won't have to testify at another trial. She won't have to relive the horrors that she experienced that day, having to recount everything before being cross-examined by defense attorneys who are trying to discredit her. I'm just glad that she can avoid all of that stress and trauma and finally move on with her life. At the end of the day, I'm heartbroken about what happened to little Jaylin. Hearing everything she went through, from being surrendered by her mother to moving in with parents who she thought would love and care for her, only to be physically tortured for years until she slowly and painfully died of heat exposure and dehydration. I can't even imagine how scary that must have been for her in her last moments, knowing that she was losing control, yet not being able to do anything about it. Then her sister Jade, seeing her lying on that trampoline and that being the last time she saw her sister, has got to be so traumatic. All of it's so tragic, and I'm glad that Ashley and Daniel are behind bars and will stay there for a very long time. I just hope that at the end of this, Jade turns out okay and is with a family who will love her and treat her right. But that is all I have for today's video, and now I want to hear what you all think. Do you think this was an intentional murder or abuse that went too far? Or do you believe Ashley that Jaylin chose to be outside for that long and that this is all just a horrible accident? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you like this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn the notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and TikTok. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which is also listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.